Jesus says, I want you to stand in awe, to be in relationship with the transcendent, with God, the one who sent me, as a child might stand in awe, with incredible trust. Surrender that need to be in control, to plan it all, to micromanage your life down to the last detail. You've heard that old saying, we make plans, God laughs. These days we're learning to laugh at ourselves. Every time we try to control it or micromanage it, I don't know about you, but the stuff I try and take care of that way usually never works out that way. In fact, it often leads me into bigger troubles than I started with. No, Jesus asks us to trust like a child. Do you know, I was thinking as I read this passage over and over and was working with it this weekend, or this week in preparation for this weekend, for today's message. I was thinking about a time when I was about 8 or 9, maybe 10 years of age. Our family used to go up to central Ontario, cottage country north of Toronto. And there was this incredible river that ran into the lake where we cottaged, Halls Lake, and the river connected the Big Hawk Lake and the Little Hawk Lake and then down to Halls Lake. And the only way you could really access the river easily was to drive up to where the top of the river started. Between Big Hawk Lake and Halls Lake, there was a log chute, a flume, I think they called that. And there was a dam there. But you couldn't get in to the river, to the good stuff, to the fun of this incredibly quick-running, crystal-clear river unless you're willing to canoe across the lake and then up the very strong current of the river or hike through the bush for an hour or two to get there. Well, we were kids. I had 2 older brothers. My mother was all too glad to have us go hike through the bush for a couple hours, boys. Go do something. Get out of here for a bit. Or often we'd go off in the canoe with a tent, and we'd pitch a tent up in the river, on the river's edge. Where we liked to go in particular was a spot where an old logging road had been washed out by the strong currents of this river. It was the most narrow part of the river. I suspect that's why they built the logging road there in the first place. But because it was the narrowest part of the river, it formed kind of a gauntlet or a kind of a pressure point for the water. Sort of like when you squeeze a hose tightly, you know what happens. The water sprays out with more force, doesn't it? Well, the river squeezed together at this one spot, and the water was so fast there. To us kids, it was wonderful. It was incredibly wonderful. That's where we'd pitch our tent, right on the edge of that washed-out logging road, because we could swim in that water all day and until it got dark at night. We'd stand on the edge, and we'd jump into this 10 or 15 feet of very quick-moving water, and our legs might have gone in up to our knees, but before our waists and our torsos got into the water, we were already bending with the current. It was that fast. By the time your head went under the water, you were already down the river 10 or 15 feet. It moved so quickly. And you had to hang on for 150 or 200 feet until the water got shallow, a foot or two deep, and it was a rocky bottom, and you could kind of drag yourself out as the current is knocking you over the stones, and you get to the riverbank and you crawl out feeling like dead weight, but laughing your fool head off because it was so much fun. And then you'd scramble back through the bush, back to the logging road, and jump in once again. It was incredible fun. It was wonderful and mysterious to my brothers and I. Well, 2 years ago, the summer before my wife and I moved to Cleveland, we took our adult children up to Halls Lake, and we gathered with our extended family. We had a bit of a reunion. We stayed at a Christian campground or a cabin retreat center. Each of us had our little cabins. And the people who ran the retreat center said, hey, we do tubing on that river now. We can drive you up the river in a truck and drop you off, and you can get in the tubes and go down the river, and we'll pick you up down by the bridge before it goes into the lake. And I'm thinking, we can go to the river and we don't have to hike through the bush to get there? Oh, I'm all over that. Sounded great. Well, we went up there, and first of all, I was pretty amazed how easily we were able to access the river now. They'd paved a road and cut their way through the trees to the river. We slipped in on the tubes, and when you're on top of the water, even though we didn't get as far as where that gauntlet was, the old logging road, when you're on top of the water, you just sort of skim along like you're on the lazy river, you know. Somewhere down that lazy river, we're singing songs and we're splashing each other, having a great time. But I noticed as we made our way down the river, along the riverbanks, there were all sorts of new McMansions that had been built up on the riverbanks. They had literally bulldozed their way through the forest, built roads, access roads, and built all sorts of cottages and homes that they carved out of the woods and built upon the stone of the great Canadian Shield. At first I was a little put out. This is my river, I thought. How did they find out about our secret river up here? And I thought, I can totally appreciate that you'd want to build a home next to this incredible river. What a beautiful place, and which would allow you to be close to the water on a regular basis. But it dawned on me. It dawned on me as we bobbed our way along the river in our tubes that the people who lived in these homes had their backs turned away from the water. They were working on their docks, or they were cutting the lawn. One guy I saw staining his deck up by the house. I thought, boy, I'm glad I don't have a deck. Looked like a lot of work.